Hey there. I want to talk with you for a little bit about a big PDF document that for some of you may be extremely useful as you are preparing to study for the AP Comp Gov exam. I will tell you up front, and I will try to remember to tell you at the end again, that this is an optional tool. Some of you are going to find it really useful. Some of you are going to find it kind of overwhelming. And if you're in that second category, you should close the tab, throw it out the window, and never look at the course and exam description again. But for those of you who are looking for a way of categorizing the information that you're going to need to know for this exam, that's a little bit more compact and also a little bit more official than cobbling together all of my reading guides from the last semester, the course and exam description might help you out. So I'm just going to walk you through how you might want to use this document, what you want to look for when you're looking through this document, and I will leave you the choice of whether you actually want to use this as part of your exam prep strategy. So the CED, the course and exam description, is a document issued by the College Board that is basically the Bible of the AP Comp Gov course. It lays out what is required for teachers to teach, for students to know on this exam, and it also contains a whole bunch of other information that's a little bit less relevant for you. There's some stuff in there that might be helpful, like sample exam questions, some of which you've already seen in my class in my review sessions, but what's really important for you is the section of this document called the unit guides. So if you choose to do this, go find the PDF. I'll link it in the description of this video. And you want to scroll down. The first couple dozen pages are totally irrelevant to your life. They're boilerplate from the College Board. But what you really want to start looking at is the unit guides. What those do is divide up all of the important content for AP Comp Gov into 5 different units. And I will flag for you, this will be a little bit confusing, that they are organized thematically. They are organized by major concept. I don't teach my course that way. I teach my course country by country. Different teachers do it differently. But just so you know, when you see all this language about Unit 3, Unit 5, and you've never heard of those things before, it's not because you're taking a totally different course. It's just because I organize my class differently than the CED organizes it, but we teach the same content material. You're going to find as you look through those 5 units, they're broken down into a bunch of different subtopics, basically 2 important categories of things. You're going to find a bunch of general concepts, and you're also going to find some important country-specific information. I'm showing you right now a screenshot of topic 1.1, which just happens to be the first topic of the first unit of the course, which describes what political scientists do. I'll walk you through a couple of other examples as well. But you can see on this screenshot, you can see this first sort of page of the unit guide is going to talk about some of those basic things that we did on the first or the second day of your class, right? What's the distinction between quantitative and qualitative information? What's the distinction between empirical and normative data? What's the distinction between causation and correlation? All these kind of basic principles of the discipline that help us understand what it is that comparative political scientists do. When you're looking through the CED, if this is the way you choose to do it, basically 3 things that you really want to pay attention to. The first is specific vocabulary. I'm just showing you the second part of topic 1.1, the practice of political scientists. As you're reading all this stuff in the right-hand column under the label essential knowledge for each topic, you really want to pay attention to specific vocabulary, especially if there is a definition laid out. Right? So if I'm looking at the second page of topic 1.1, the first word that's going to attract my attention is the word empirical. That's a term that we've defined in class. I need to remember that empirical describes these kind of factual, true or false questions, as opposed to normative, which describes these sort of good, bad, value judgment questions and statements. I probably want to remember that empirical information is mostly what we do in the political science discipline in the AP Comp Gov course. We are more concerned with what is than we are with what should be. I also want to pay attention, especially every time I see a list of terms, right? If I'm looking down at the bottom of this screenshot, I'll know that I'll see just a list of indices, of measurements, of terms that I need to be able to understand if they are presented to me in a graph or in a table or in a quantitative analysis question, right? So you have to know, because it's on this list in the CED, you have to know what the Human Development Index is. You have to know how to define and measure gross domestic product and GDP per capita. You have to know know what the Gini index is. You have to have a passing familiarity with Freedom House, which is that organization that kind of rates countries' levels of democracy and tracks changes over time. Everything on this list you're accountable for knowing. So as I'm looking through the CED, if I'm studying for this exam, I probably want to pause and say, hey, if I'm not really familiar with what the GDP growth rate is or what it might tell me and what it might not tell me about a country, I probably want to pause and make a note to myself that that's something I should be reviewing before the exam day. So you want to pay attention to all this specific vocabulary. You might want to highlight, you might want to print out the unit guides, whatever works for you, but this is going to be a really good guide to just the words that you need to define, which is a big part of this course. Number two, you're going to see some fairly detailed descriptions of specific concepts in this course that tend to be a big deal, right? So I've skipped ahead a little bit to topic 1.3, democracy versus authoritarianism. You know that's a really big deal in this course. We talk about it constantly. We apply it to basically every country, right? And so in this first bullet-pointed list, or this lettered list under essential knowledge, I'm going to look at, it's going to lay out for me 5 factors that determine how democratic or authoritarian a state is. And so I want to be able to read those. I probably should expect that they might ask me a question about one or more characteristics that would determine how democratic or how authoritarian a regime is, right? So I want to look down through that list and think about rule of law, independence of the media, free and fair elections, et cetera, et cetera. I also want to pay attention to basically anything else that seems like a definitive statement about, in this case, democracy or authoritarianism, right? So further down here, it's telling me that in a more democratic regime, I'm more likely to have independence between different branches of government. The executive, the legislature, the judiciary are all likely to have independent spheres of action where they get to do what they want without significant interference from other branches. So I'm thinking about independence of branches of government. That's going to be an important definitional concept when thinking about democracy. If I'm looking at this last item on this page in the screenshot, I probably want to know that there are different types of authoritarian regimes. Not all authoritarian regimes are the same. So I should be able to distinguish between an illiberal democracy where there are elections, but they're not free or fair or competitive, versus a one-party state versus a theocracy. I probably want to be thinking about examples of those in this course, right? So when I hear the word theocracy, I need to be thinking about Iran because it's a case study country that fits that definition. But all these kinds of descriptions of concepts, those are things you want to pay attention to because it's a pretty safe bet that they will try to ask you some question on this exam that asks you to display your understanding of the factors that distinguish between a democratic and authoritarian regime. Finally, embedded in here, and this is going to be a little bit tricky because you have to go on a scavenger hunt if you want to take the country by country approach to studying, but embedded in the course and exam description with each relevant topic, you'll find some pretty specific information that you need to know about each country. So I've skipped down here to topic 1.5, which is called Sources of Power and Authority. And it's asking you to not only in general say, where do regimes get their power? Where do regimes get their authority to govern? But also, here are some specific sources of power and authority for each of our case study countries that you need to know. So if I'm looking at point A, it's telling me I absolutely have to know that the Chinese Communist Party is in control of the military, of the People's Liberation Army, not the state, but the party, which is something that I've emphasized in teaching this course. If I look down to point B, I have to know that the transition to theocracy after the Iranian Revolution of 1979 is this important historical source of authority and of power for the regime in Iran, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the features of the course and exam description that I hope you will be able to pay attention to. There's a couple different ways that you might choose to use this document in your own preparation for the exam. If you want to go country by country, you might try to just Control F for each specific country, skim down through the unit guides, and make a list of what country-specific information you're seeing so that you can try and distinguish between the essential information for each country versus the current event stuff that is interesting but not necessarily required that you memorize for the exam. In addition to that, I would not recommend using just the country-specific stuff as your only approach to studying. You also want to look back, look for vocabulary, look for concepts. Again, you have all this information laid out in the study materials that I produce, in your homework guides, your reading guides, all of our review materials that we'll go through over the next few weeks. But the CED might be a good way for some of you to just get your head out of my materials, to do a little bit more of a systematic approach, or to organize this information in a different way. And if you think that would be helpful, you are absolutely welcome and in fact encouraged to do that. So look in the video description for the link to this PDF. Feel free to use it or ignore it forever, whatever floats your boat. And of course, shoot me an email if you have any questions. Thanks and good luck.